In a small house on the outskirts of town, police found two bodies, a young man and a middle-aged woman. Blood trails led from the living room to the kitchen, and even semen and barefoot prints were on the floor. Neighbors reported hearing screams an hour earlier, but no one called for help. The deceased's name was Michael Randall. He was 22 years old. He was from a neighboring county and grew up in an ordinary working-class family. For the past 2 years, he had worked at a car repair shop and often came to town on weekends. Here, he met 20-year-old Emily Harper. Emily lived with her mother, Linda Harper, 42, in a one-story house on a quiet street. The girl's father left the family when Emily was 7, so Linda raised her daughter alone. Michael and Emily met at the beginning of the summer. The young people met in a cafe in the city center. The conversation began by chance. He asked her to help him choose a gift for his younger sister. A few days later, they met again and soon began to spend most of their time together. Emily told friends that Michael gave the impression of a calm and reliable person, although he sometimes withdrew and did not like to talk about personal problems. The relationship developed quickly. Michael often visited Harper's house, helped with Linda's car repairs, and once fixed the door in the kitchen. Neighbors later said that he seemed like a normal guy, non-confrontational, and always said hello. However, about 3 months into the relationship, Emily noticed changes. Michael began to respond to messages less often, and sometimes he would not show up for meetings without explanation. Linda, according to neighbors, also began to leave the house dressed up more often, which was previously uncharacteristic for her. In September, Emily happened to see Michael and Linda together in a mall parking lot. They were talking separately from others, and, she said, seemed too close to be having a normal conversation. At first, she thought she was mistaken, but then she began to notice details. Michael sometimes spoke of Linda with excessive respect, and her mother evaded direct questions about where she was at night. Things escalated by mid-October. Emily found messages between Michael and Linda on her mother's phone. The messages discussed meetings that her daughter knew nothing about. The tone of the messages left no doubt that the relationship was beyond friendship. Emily tried to talk to her mother, but she replied that Michael was just helping around the house and that Emily was exaggerating. The girl then turned to Michael, but he avoided a direct conversation, claiming that everything was misunderstood. Emily's friends later told police that in the weeks before the tragedy, she had become irritable, often talking about betrayal, and that no one understood her. She stopped attending college and rarely left the house, except for short meetings with Michael, which ended in arguments. The last time the three were seen together was at a neighbor's child's birthday party 2 days before the events. According to witnesses, the atmosphere between them was tense. Emily barely spoke to her mother. Michael tried to joke, but Linda looked wary. No one could have guessed how this family conflict would end. On the evening of October 18th, Emily finally became convinced that her suspicions were not unfounded. According to the investigation, Michael and Linda met at a motel outside the city that day. The administrator of the establishment said during interrogation that he saw them together around 6 in the evening when they rented a room for several hours. Information about the room and the time of the visit was later confirmed by phone calls recorded by communication towers. Emily learned of the meeting by chance that same evening. Her friend, who worked at a roadside cafe, saw Michael and Linda together and decided to tell the girl about it. When Emily called her mother, Linda answered that she was at a friend's in the neighboring area. It later turned out that this was not true. From that moment on, the situation moved from suspicion to open confrontation. Over the next 2 days, Emily tried to talk to Michael, but he avoided the meeting, explaining that he was busy at work. According to the investigation, Emily sent Michael more than 20 messages during those days, some of which have been preserved. In them, she demanded an explanation and accused him of betrayal. On the night of October 19th, Linda and Emily had an argument at home. Neighbors later told police they heard loud voices coming from the kitchen window. The argument lasted for about an hour. Linda screamed at her daughter not to interfere in adult matters. Emily accused her of destroying the family. They barely spoke since then. At the same time, Michael tried to mend fences with both women. His phone contained messages to Linda asking her not to make things worse, and to Emily asking them to meet and discuss things calmly. However, neither side was willing to make concessions. On October 20th, around noon, Emily accidentally saw Michael outside the house when he was waiting for Linda. According to the neighbor, the girl approached him, a conversation ensued, and ended with shouting. The neighbor claimed that Emily shouted threats and accused them both of deception. That same evening, Linda tried to talk to her daughter, but the conversation ended in another argument. Linda claimed that her relationship with Michael was her personal business and that Emily should stop being dramatic. During the investigation, it became known that Linda was planning a serious relationship with Michael and even discussed the possibility of moving with him, which was the final blow for Emily. A psychologist who worked with Emily after her arrest later said that the girl experienced a strong sense of betrayal and isolation during this period. She believed that her mother had taken Michael's side and that her own feelings were completely ignored. On the morning of October 21st, Michael came to Harper's house again. Linda came out to him and they talked on the porch for about 20 minutes. Emily watched them from the window. After Michael left, she took the keys to the house and left in an unknown direction. According to neighbors, she was gone for several hours. That same evening, Emily tried to talk to Michael alone. The meeting took place in a nearby park. Linda came there having learned about their conversation. The three were together for about half an hour, after which Michael left. The quarrel between mother and daughter continued for a long time. CCTV footage from a nearby store captured Emily buying a kitchen knife late that evening. The cashier later testified that the girl was extremely irritated, spoke in a clipped tone, and barely responded to questions. The knife later became the primary weapon in the crime. According to Emily's friend, on the evening of October 21st, the girl said that she was not going to take it anymore. The friend did not take her words seriously, deciding that she was talking about moving or breaking up. Emily received her last message from Michael around 10 in the evening. He wrote that he wanted to meet her and explain everything. Emily didn't answer. Linda was at home at that time, getting ready for bed. The next day, events occurred that later formed the basis of a criminal case and caused a wide public outcry. October 22nd began as a typical autumn day. According to the Weather Service, the temperature in the morning was about 12 degrees and there was a light rain. The Harper family's neighbors later said that the house looked calm. The curtains were drawn. There were no cars in the yard. At 9:15 a.m., Linda Harper texted a friend that she planned to spend the day at home cleaning. Michael was at work at the time. His colleagues confirmed that he arrived at 8 a.m. and stayed until noon. Emily, according to witnesses, was seen walking toward the city center that morning. By midday, Linda had returned from a nearby grocery store. CCTV footage shows her carrying 2 bags, entering the house, and closing the door. At 12:40, Michael finished his shift and texted Linda that he was coming. The correspondence was saved on the woman's phone. She replied that she would wait. Emily was in the house at the time. A neighbor saw her go out into the yard and return a few minutes later. Later, the investigation established that the girl had moved a kitchen knife from the shed to the kitchen, where food was usually kept. At 1:15 p.m., Michael arrived at the house. 2 neighbors saw his car. One of them claimed that he was in a good mood, even waved to her. Michael entered the house through the front door. The events that followed were reconstructed from circumstantial evidence and Emily's confessions after her arrest. According to her, the 3 of them were first in the kitchen. Linda was preparing dinner. Michael was talking to Emily, trying to explain his actions over the past few weeks. Emily claimed that she felt humiliated when her mother spoke to Michael rather than to her. At some point, the argument escalated into a heated argument. A neighbor living through the wall heard a woman screaming and a man's voice, but could not make out the words. According to experts, this happened around 1:40 p.m. At 1:45 p.m., Emily grabbed a knife from the kitchen table. Michael was stabbed in the chest, and according to the medical examiner, the blade punctured his lung and heart. He fell to the floor near the dining room table. Linda screamed and tried to get to her daughter, but Linda stabbed her in the neck. The investigation established that Linda died almost instantly from massive blood loss. Michael was still alive for several minutes, but according to experts, he could not move or speak on his own. Emily ran out into the yard after the attack. CCTV from a nearby home captured her standing on the porch with blood on her hands at 1:50 p.m. She then returned to the house and stayed inside for several minutes. It is not known exactly what she was doing at that time. Police later found her belongings in disarray and bare footprints on the floor, leading from the kitchen to the bathroom and back. The first 911 call came from a neighbor at 1:57 p.m. The woman said she heard screams and saw Emily running into the yard with something red in her arms. A patrol was dispatched to Harper's home immediately. At 2:05 p.m., the first officers arrived on the scene. The door was ajar, and Emily was inside. She was sitting on the floor against the wall with a knife lying next to her. Police later wrote in a report that the girl appeared confused but did not resist. Michael and Linda's bodies were found in the kitchen. Forensic experts later noted that no more than 3 minutes had passed between the blows. Both victims died before the ambulance arrived. The police immediately cordoned off the house and began questioning neighbors. Within the first hour, they were able to establish an approximate chronology of events based on calls from witnesses, camera footage, and Emily's words, who confessed to the attack within the first minutes of her arrest. At the same time, forensic experts began collecting evidence: a knife, Emily's clothes, phones of all participants, and CCTV footage were seized. 2 investigators worked on the scene, who later headed the main investigation. By 4 p.m., Harper's home had become the center of media attention. Local TV reporters had arrived at the cordon, and police were not commenting. Emily was taken to the police station at around 4:30 p.m. There she was briefly interrogated for the first time, where she confirmed that she had been the one who had struck. However, she could not explain her motives, citing betrayal and lies. Investigators recorded her words, but decided to conduct a second interrogation in the presence of a lawyer. Emily was placed in a temporary detention facility, and the bodies of Linda and Michael were sent for forensic examination. By the evening of October 22nd, the police already had the main evidence, but ahead lay the questioning of witnesses, examinations, and the preparation of charges, which were to form the basis of the trial. After Emily Harper was arrested, police immediately began standard procedures. At the station, she was placed in a separate cell for women, and the investigation was led by Detective Sergeant James Kelly, who has 20 years of experience in homicide cases. The first step was documenting all the evidence. A knife with Emily's fingerprints and blood from both victims was recovered from the kitchens of Harper's home. Forensic experts reported that the DNA on the handle matched the samples taken from the suspect. There were numerous footprints from Michael's shoes and Emily's bare feet on the floor, as well as fingerprints on the door handles and walls. Throughout the evening of October 22nd, investigators interviewed all of the immediate neighbors. 4 people testified that they heard screams coming from the house between approximately 1:40 and 1:50 p.m. 2 women saw Michael enter the house, and one of them was interviewed twice to confirm the exact time of his arrival. Both witnesses who called 911 provided recordings of the calls, which were included in the case file. Forensic scientists created a map of the house showing the exact positions of the bodies, the blood spatter, and Emily's trajectory after the attack. Crime scene photographs were included in the case file, but were not released to the press. On October 23rd at 9 a.m., Emily Harper's first official interrogation began. Her attorney, provided by the state, was present. The girl did not deny the fact of the murder, but she constantly changed the details. At first, she claimed that she acted in a state of passion, then that she did not remember the moment of the blow. When asked about motives, she spoke of betrayal and double lies, meaning Michael and Linda. At the same time, the investigation obtained data from the phones of the deceased. Correspondence between Michael and Linda confirmed their romantic relationship. The messages discussed joint trips, plans for the future, and secrecy because of Emily. Linda herself wrote in several messages that she was afraid of her daughter's reaction. Michael's colleagues spoke to him on the day of the murder. They said he was planning a serious conversation with Emily and hoped for reconciliation. No one in his circle knew about his relationship with Linda until the media publications that appeared 2 days after the tragedy. On the evening of October 23rd, the forensic examination completed its work. The report confirmed that Linda died instantly from a neck wound with damage to the carotid artery, and Michael died from a penetrating wound to the heart. There were no signs of a struggle on the bodies, except for small abrasions on Michael's hands, probably from an attempt to stop the blow. Detective Kelly re-interviewed Emily on October 24th. This time, she recounted the sequence of events more clearly. An argument in the kitchen, accusations of deception, feelings of humiliation, then a sudden outburst of rage. Her accounts matched the timeline established by the calls and witness statements. Investigators interviewed Emily's friend, who confirmed that the day before the tragedy, the girl had spoken of being unable to endure everything. However, her words did not indicate direct preparation for murder. The cashier at the store where Emily bought the knife was also questioned. He said that the purchase was calm and the girl showed no signs of aggression. However, the fact that she had bought the knife the day before the events became important evidence when she was charged with premeditated murder. On October 25th, the district attorney's office formally charged Emily Harper with 2 counts of first-degree murder of Michael Randall and first-degree murder of Linda Harper. her attorney requested a psychiatric evaluation, citing the defendant's emotional state and possible temporary disorder. The court granted the motion, and Emily was transferred to the County Mental Health Center on October 27th for evaluation. Doctors were to determine whether she understood the nature of her actions and could control her behavior at the time of the crime. Meanwhile, investigators continued to gather evidence. They examined bank statements, CCTV footage of Michael's walk home, and phone calls from the past 2 weeks. None of the material pointed to anyone else's involvement in the tragedy or preparation by others. By the end of October, the investigation had completed the active phase of the investigation. All testimonies, examinations, and evidence were transferred to the district attorney's office to prepare the case for trial. In early November, prosecutors confirmed they intended to seek the maximum sentence. Despite the defendant's young age, a court hearing was set for late December, and Emily was remanded in custody pending trial. Emily Harper's trial began December 28 in Mason County Circuit Court. The jury was selected a week before the trial. Prosecutors pressed for 2 counts of first-degree murder, while the defense sought to have the case reclassified as manslaughter. At the first hearing, the prosecutor presented a detailed timeline of events, including surveillance video, 911 call logs, forensic evidence, and text messages between Linda Harper and Michael Randall. The prosecutor argued that Emily acted with premeditation, citing the purchase of a knife the day before the attack and multiple threats in text messages. In response, the defense presented psychiatric reports. The experts stated that Emily had suffered from acute emotional distress at the time of the crime, caused by a combination of betrayal by her mother and boyfriend, as well as prolonged stress. According to the psychologist, the girl had no previous convictions, had a positive character reference at school, and showed no signs of antisocial behavior. Neighbors, Michael's co-workers, and Emily's friend testified. They confirmed the facts of quarrels and tense relations in the family, but no direct evidence of preparation of the murder was provided. The prosecutor insisted that even in her emotional instability, the defendant understood the consequences of her actions. She bought the knife, waited until Michael and Linda were together, and stabbed them purposefully. The defendant admitted the facts at the trial, but claimed that she did not remember the details of the attack. Her testimony was short, and she did not answer many questions. After 4 days of hearings, the jury retired to deliberate. Deliberations lasted 6 hours. On January 2nd, the court announced its verdict. Emily Harper was found guilty of second-degree murder of both victims. The court took into account her age, lack of criminal record, and psychiatric findings of partial loss of control at the time of the crime. The verdict was announced on January 5th. Emily Harper was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. The case caused a wide public resonance. Local newspapers and TV channels discussed the circumstances of the tragedy. Psychologists commented on the reasons for such crimes, and lawyers argued about the correctness of reclassifying the article to a less serious one.